Hello and welcome to Story Verdict. Today I'm going to tell you the story of husband and sister mocked me as a failed clerk and threw me out in the rain. They fainted when the military convoy arrived to salute their special ops commander. The story goes like this. The first thing my husband did, when I came home from a 6-month classified deployment, was point toward the iron gates of the seaside mansion I had purchased and tell security to throw me back into the rain. He stood beneath the crystal lights of the entrance hall with one arm wrapped around my younger sister's waist, dressed in the midnight blue tuxedo I had paid for, smiling at hundreds of guests as though my return were nothing more than an inconvenient interruption to the celebration of his success. My uniform was hidden beneath an old gray field coat. My boots were caked with mud from 3 days of military transport, and the canvas backpack on my shoulder looked exactly like the one I had carried when I left home 12 years earlier. To everyone watching, I looked like what Grant and Natalie had always claimed I was, a tired, underpaid military clerk who had finally come back too late to matter. "You cannot just appear here and expect us to pretend nothing happened," Grant said, his voice loud enough for the investors gathered behind him to hear. "You disappeared for half a year, you ignored your marriage, abandoned this family. And now you come dressed like a refugee to embarrass us at the most important event of my career." I looked at his hand on my sister's waist. Natalie did not move away. She wore my mother's diamond earrings and the pale gold dress I had once helped her choose for her own engagement party, before the man she intended to marry discovered she had lied about nearly every debt in her name. She looked at me with fear for less than a second, then raised her chin as if she had been practicing this moment. "You should have called," she said. "I was under operational blackout." Grant laughed. "There it is again. The mysterious military excuse. Elena, you file reports in an office. You are not leading troops through enemy territory." A few guests smiled politely, others looked uncomfortable but remained silent. They had come to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Hale Meridian Systems, the defense logistics company Grant claimed he had built from nothing. The giant screens inside the ballroom showed photographs of him shaking hands with investors, standing beside prototype vehicles, and speaking at technology conferences. None showed the woman who had supplied the first $6 million, negotiated the company's protected government licenses, or paid its employees during the 2 years when Grant's decisions nearly destroyed it. "Move your hand," I said. He looked down at Natalie as though he had forgotten where it rested. Then he tightened his grip. "No," my sister's breath caught. "You have been sleeping with my husband," I said. No one in the doorway moved. The string quartet inside continued playing for several awkward seconds before the musicians realized the room had gone quiet. Grant's face hardened. "We did not plan for this to happen." "How long?" Natalie answered before he could. 4 months. 5, Grant corrected. She turned toward him in shock. That small betrayal inside the larger one almost made me laugh. 5 months, I repeated. 1 month after I deployed. Grant stepped down the marble stairs toward me. "You were gone long before that. Maybe not physically, but you were never really here. Every dinner interrupted by a secure call. Every holiday canceled because some colonel needed a spreadsheet. Every question answered with 'I cannot discuss it.' I built a life while you hid behind classified paperwork. You built this life with my money." His smile disappeared. "Your salary could not pay for the wine being served tonight." "No," I said, "my salary could not." Natalie moved closer to him. "Grant told me everything. The company bought this house. His investors funded the renovation. You contributed a little in the beginning, but you keep acting as though that makes you the owner of his life. Did he show you the purchase documents?" "I live here." "That is not what I asked." Grant waved toward the security guards. "Enough. This is a private event and you are trespassing. This is my home." It was. He reached inside his jacket and removed a folded document. Even before he opened it, I recognized the blue seal of the county recorder's office. "The property belongs to Hale Coastal Holdings now," he said. "The transfer was completed 3 months ago. You signed the spouse receipt before your assignment." I took the document from his hand. The signature resembled mine from a distance. The forger had copied the angular E, the long line beneath Ward, and the military habit of writing the date in day-month-year order. But they had missed the small break I always left between Elena and Ward after an old wrist injury, made continuous cursive painful. They had also used a digital notary certificate belonging to an attorney who had died 11 days before the supposed signing. You forged this. You signed a stack of documents before leaving. Not this one. Prove it. He smiled again because he believed the cost of proving it would be greater than anything an office clerk could afford. You should go quietly, Elena. I am prepared to offer you a fair settlement. $50,000, your personal belongings. And 6 months of health insurance, more than generous considering you abandoned the marriage. The guests closest to us began whispering. I recognized 2 banking executives, a retired senator, the vice president of a major aerospace manufacturer, and a deputy procurement officer from the Department of Defense. Grant wanted them to witness my humiliation because he had converted my absence into part of his success story. The failed wife returned. The brilliant husband moved on. The beautiful sister understood him. The company survived because he had finally removed the burden. You announced your relationship tonight? I asked. Natalie looked toward the ballroom. On the largest screen, a paused video showed her and Grant standing together beneath the words, "A New Future for Hale Meridian." We were going to announce our engagement after the investment presentation, she said. You are still married to me. Grant shrugged. The divorce petition will be filed Monday. After you secured the financing, his eyes narrowed. My business is none of your concern. Your company is presenting a military transport platform built from restricted architecture. You would not understand the technology. I understand it better than your engineers. He laughed. And several guests laughed with him because powerful men often train rooms to mistake confidence for evidence. You process logistics reports, he said. You did not invent military systems. Who told you that? You did. I had told him I worked in military logistics administration because that was the cover position assigned to me when Joint Special Operations Command moved my unit into a compartmented program 12 years earlier. At first, the lie was about security. Later it became a test I did not admit I was conducting. I wanted to know whether Grant could respect a woman whose contribution appeared ordinary. I wanted my sister to value me without knowing that 4-star commanders called for my opinion before moving assets across continents. I wanted a home where rank medals and sealed records remained outside the door. Instead, my silence became the empty space where Grant placed his superiority. Give me my backpack, I said. One of the guards held it after pulling it from my shoulder. Grant looked at the old canvas. Its seams repaired with green thread and the metal frame scarred by years of field use. This thing? He took it from the guard and opened the main compartment before I could stop him. My clothes, medical kit, encrypted tablet, and a sealed black pouch fell onto the wet stone. The pouch opened when it struck the ground. A dark metal insignia slid into the rainwater, a silver dagger crossing a compass beneath the words Sentinel Command. Grant picked it up. Another souvenir? Put it down. What is it supposed to be? It is not yours. Natalie leaned toward him. Maybe it's from one of her office training groups. Grant turned the insignia over. The reverse carried my name, identification number, and the words Joint Special Operations Commander. He read them silently, then looked at me. For one brief moment, uncertainty moved across his face, then pride defeated caution. Anyone can buy military-looking garbage online. He tossed it into the mud beside the gate. There, take your little badge and go back to whatever barracks will have you. I bent and picked it up. Rain ran over the silver dagger and between my fingers. The men and women who had carried that insignia had survived collapsed embassies, hostage extractions, intercepted weapons transfers, and missions that would never appear in public histories. 8 of them had died during the operation I had just completed. Grant saw cheap metal because no one important had told him how to look at it. Do you remember the night your first investor withdrew? I asked him. What does that have to do with anything? You were sitting on the kitchen floor in our apartment. You said the company would close within 10 days. I recovered. $6 million entered the company the next morning through Valor Meridian Trust. An institutional fund recognized my potential. I created Valor Meridian. He stared at me, then laughed. Of course you did. The trust purchased the debt on your office, funded the first vehicle prototype, and covered payroll for 14 months. A military clerk created a private investment trust? No. A military officer with licensing income from secure logistics patents created it. Natalie stepped forward. What patents? The routing architecture Grant's company calls Meridian Shield began as my battlefield resupply model. Grant's jaw tightened. That model belongs to the government. Operational use belongs to the government. Civilian licensing rights were assigned to a Veterans Technology Trust under the original development agreement. You expect these people to believe you secretly own my company? I do not own all of it. There. Valor Meridian holds 51% of the voting debt and 38% of the equity through preferred instruments. Your personal voting control drops below 12% if the fraud clauses activate. He looked toward the investors behind him. Their expressions had changed. Grant understood that even a ridiculous claim could become dangerous when spoken in front of bankers. Get her off the property, he ordered. The guards moved toward me. Do not touch the watch, I said. One grabbed my right arm. The other twisted the left behind me. Pain flashed through a healing incision beneath my shoulder blade. I did not resist. The secure black watch on my wrist pressed against the guard's sleeve. With my thumb, I tapped the outer ring twice. Held the crown for 3 seconds, and entered the silent activation sequence my team called the Honor Protocol. It was not a magical weapon. It did not summon tanks to punish unfaithful spouses. It transmitted my identity, medical status, location, compromise insignia report, and evidence preservation alert to Sentinel Command. I had been ordered to activate it if my classified identity was exposed, my operational equipment was seized, or a private organization attempted to use restricted military architecture. Grant had managed all three within 8 minutes. Last chance, he said as security dragged me toward the gate. Sign the settlement agreement on Monday. Keep quiet about Natalie, and I will make sure you have enough money for a decent apartment. You are giving away money you do not control. I control everything inside these gates. For approximately 47 more minutes. Natalie stared at my watch. What did you do? I reported a security breach. Grant rolled his eyes. Your office supervisor is not sending anyone. The gates opened. The guards threw my backpack onto the road. One pushed me between the shoulder blades. I fell to one knee in the water. Behind me, applause began inside the mansion as the event coordinator restarted the program. Grant and Natalie turned their backs on me and walked into the light. The gates closed. I sat in the rain beside the insignia and remembered the first time I met Grant. He was 28 and standing outside a small technology conference in Arlington, arguing with a broken ticket machine. He wore a cheap suit, carried presentation boards under one arm, and looked embarrassed when I fixed the machine by reconnecting a loose cable beneath the screen. He asked whether I was an engineer. I told him I worked in military administration. He bought me coffee anyway. That mattered to me because so many men lost interest after hearing the word administration. Grant listened while I described supply problems without revealing my operational role. He said logistics was the nervous system of every great organization. I thought he understood invisible work. We married 2 years later in a courthouse because I received deployment orders with less than a week's notice. Natalie cried harder than I did. My younger sister had always been the beautiful one, the impulsive one, the person my mother defended before asking what happened. I was the reliable daughter. When bills appeared, I paid them. When Natalie left college after a failed relationship, I found her an apartment. When she wanted to start an interior design studio, I covered the lease and never told our mother the business lost money. Natalie loved me. But her love grew comfortably around the assumption that I would survive every cost. Grant recognized the same pattern. At first he admired my strength. Later he used it as an excuse. Elena can handle the distance. Elena does not care about clothes. Elena earns enough. Elena understands pressure. Strong people are often punished with the belief that harm matters less when they can endure it. My 6-month absence had not been training. I commanded Sentinel 9, a joint special operations unit responsible for recovering weapons scientists, taken by a private military network operating through 3 coastal states. The network used shipping companies, encrypted financial exchanges, and humanitarian supply routes to hide personnel and components. Our final target was a mountain facility where 8 hostages were held beneath an abandoned mining complex. We entered through flooded service tunnels because every road was monitored. The operation lasted 19 hours. Major Priya Desai died sealing a blast door so the extraction team could reach the hostages. Sergeant Cole Ramirez was killed covering the medical evacuation. 6 others did not return. I spent the final 11 days overseas identifying remains, meeting families under classified conditions, and completing an intelligence review. During those same months, Grant and Natalie shared my bed, forged my signature, transferred the mansion, and announced to employees that I had abandoned the marriage. I learned about the affair 3 weeks before returning. Sentinel financial analysts found irregular transfers from Valor Meridian into a shell company owned by Natalie. The transfers led to property filings, jewelry purchases, and hotel records. General Malcolm Vance, commander of Joint Strategic Operations, advised me to remain abroad while investigators secured warrants. "You are not required to confront them personally," he said. "I want to see the house. The property can be secured without you. I want to see what they built from my absence." That is the wife speaking. "Yes, the commander wants evidence preserved, restricted architecture recovered, and Hale Meridian removed from the procurement process if the audit confirms fraud. The commander is easier to advise. She sleeps less." Vance had known me since I was a 23-year-old lieutenant who challenged his convoy plan during a training exercise. He was a colonel then. I expected punishment. Instead, he made me present the alternative to the entire unit. My route reduced exposure by 40%. Years later, when the Sentinel program needed a commander who understood intelligence, logistics, and human unpredictability, he recommended me. Publicly, I remained Colonel Elena Ward. Administrative liaison. Inside compartmented records, I held operational command authority across branches and agencies. Rank did not explain everything about command. Trust did. Tonight, Grant had exposed the insignia linked to that authority before defense contractors while presenting copied technology to potential military buyers. The honor protocol did not activate because my feelings were hurt. It activated because his arrogance had crossed into national security. I rose from the road and carried my belongings to a stone wall opposite the mansion. The rain became colder. My phone had been inside the backpack and was soaked. But the encrypted watch vibrated once. Signal received. Hold position if safe. I looked through the gates. Inside, Grant stood on stage beneath a giant image of the Meridian Shield Command platform. Natalie waited beside him with one hand on his arm. He spoke about loyalty, innovation, and protecting soldiers. He described himself as a founder who had risked everything. The audience applauded. On a screen near the windows, a financial graph showed $50 million in projected government contracts. Grant had no signed contract. He had a preliminary evaluation letter from a procurement office and a meeting scheduled for the following month. The gala was designed to create the appearance of government approval before the technical review. Several guests knew that. They stayed because appearances often become investments if repeated with enough confidence. At 11:48. The lights along the coastal road went dark. The mansion generators activated automatically. Guests moved toward the windows. Grant paused his presentation. The road outside the gates was normally busy with late-night traffic from the resort district. Now it stood empty. Red barriers lowered at both intersections. Unmarked federal vehicles took positions beyond them. At 11:51, my watch displayed a second message. Warrants confirmed. Command convoy inbound. Natalie came outside without an umbrella. She stopped behind the closed gates. "Elena, you should go back inside. Grant says you are lying." "But the investors are asking about Valor Meridian. He should answer them. Is it really yours? The trust is real. Why did you never tell me? I told you my military work produced licensing income. You said you were comfortable." "You heard what made you comfortable." She gripped the iron bars. "Did you buy this as house? The Athena Valor Residential Trust purchased it. I funded the trust." Her face changed. Grant said the company bought it. The company was not solvent when the property closed. He showed me wire records. Valor Meridian transferred the funds into Hale Coastal Holdings under a conditional ownership structure. Grant removed the trust reference from the copy he showed you. Why would he do that? I looked at her hand. She wore a sapphire ring I had seen in the financial audit. Grant purchased it 3 months earlier from a jeweler in Boston. "Did you ask him where that came from?" She covered it with her other hand. "He said it was a symbol of our future. It was purchased using money transferred from my deployment bonus account. I did not know." "You knew you were sleeping with my husband." Her eyes filled. We were lonely. You lived in my house. You were never there. I was deployed. You were always deployed or working or locked in a study with secure calls. Grant needed someone who saw him, and you needed someone who made you feel chosen. She flinched. Maybe. You could have told me the marriage was broken. I was afraid you would cut me off. The honesty stopped me. So you understood that your life depended on my money. Not like this. How? You paid for things because you loved me, and you believed love meant the payments would continue after betrayal. I thought Grant owned the company. You also signed the deed transfer as a witness. She looked away. He said you had already agreed. The notary was dead. I didn't know. You watched him copy my signature from the marriage certificate. Her head snapped up. That fact had not appeared in the public records. It came from a hidden security camera in my study, installed to protect classified equipment. How do you know? Because the room recorded you. Her hands began to shake. Elena, I can explain. Explain to investigators. Investigators? The sound reached us before the headlights appeared. Low engines rolled across the road beyond the northern barrier. The first vehicles were military police escorts, followed by black armored transports bearing no ceremonial markings. 2 command vehicles came behind them. A helicopter moved along the coastline without landing, its light sweeping across the cliff below the mansion. Guests poured onto the terrace. Grant pushed through them and reached Natalie at the gate. What is this? He demanded. She called someone. Who? I don't know. He looked toward me. You arranged military intimidation over a domestic dispute? Go inside, Grant. This is private property. Not for long. The convoy stopped outside the gates at exactly midnight. Military police exited first and formed a secure perimeter. Federal agents from the Defense Criminal Investigative Service stepped from 2 unmarked vehicles. A court-appointed evidence receiver arrived with civilian attorneys. The final command vehicle remained closed. Grant shouted through the gate. You have no authority to enter without a warrant. The lead federal agent held up a sealed packet. We have multiple federal search warrants, an intellectual property preservation order, a financial restraining order, and a county receivership notice covering the property. This is harassment. Open the gate. Grant turned toward his security chief. Do not. The security chief looked at the warrant, then at the military police. Sir. The property management system has received a court command. The gates opened automatically. Grant stepped backward. Who owns the access system? I asked. He did not answer. The military police did not rush the house. They moved with measured precision, recording every entry. Federal agents secured the server room, offices, and financial record storage. The evidence receiver addressed the guests and asked them to remain calm while names were checked against the warrant scope. No one was forced to kneel. No one was dragged across the lawn. Real authority did not need the noise Grant associated with power. The rear door of the final command vehicle opened. General Malcolm Vance stepped onto the wet road in dress uniform, 4 stars visible across each shoulder. Grant's face changed completely. He had spent 2 years attempting to meet Vance. Hale Meridian's marketing material described General Vance as the future sponsor of its transport platform, though Vance had never endorsed the company. Grant had once paid a lobbying firm nearly $400,000 to arrange a photograph with him and failed. Now the general walked through Grant's gates without looking at him. Vance approached me where I stood beside the stone wall. Soaked, bruised, and wearing the old field coat, his gaze moved to the mud on my insignia and the red mark around my wrist where the guard had grabbed me. Commander Ward, he said, report. Restricted insignia exposed. Operational equipment opened. Civilian derivative architecture presented without authorization. Possible property and financial forgery confirmed. I was removed from the premises before evidence could be preserved. Medical status? Stable. Did they strike you? Security used force during removal. I do not believe serious injury occurred. Vance turned toward the 2 guards. They looked as though the night had become a different planet. Names recorded? He asked the lead agent. Yes, General. They cooperate unless evidence establishes criminal assault. Understood. Then Vance stepped backward, brought his heels together, and raised his right hand in a formal salute. Every uniformed officer behind him followed. The movement passed through the convoy like a silent wave. Grant stared. Natalie covered her mouth. Guests gathered behind the mansion windows stopped whispering. Colonel Elena Ward, Vance said, his voice carrying across the entrance court. Commanding Officer of Joint Sentinel Operations, recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, Defense Superior Service Medal, Joint Service Commendation, and classified honors pending release. On behalf of the commanders who entrusted their people to you and the teams you brought home, welcome back from Operation Night Harbor. I returned the salute. Thank you, General. He lowered his hand only after I lowered mine. Grant stepped forward. Colonel? Vance looked at him for the first time. Yes. She told me she was a clerk. Colonel Ward's public cover assigned her to administrative logistics. Her operational authority was classified. She is my wife. That status does not grant access to classified identity, equipment, or intellectual property. She funded my company without telling me who she was. Your investors will discuss disclosure questions with the receiver. I am here because your event displayed derivatives of a restricted logistics architecture and because your employees represented federal endorsement that does not exist. Grant looked at me. You planned this. I planned to return home, I said. You created everything after I reached the door. The convoy was waiting. Investigators were already preparing warrants based on financial evidence collected during my deployment. The honor protocol accelerated the operation after you opened my equipment and displayed protected systems. You used the military to settle an affair. Vance's expression became cold. The military does not investigate adultery between civilians. Federal authorities investigate forged property records, diversion of restricted funds, false defense procurement claims, theft of protected technology, money laundering, and obstruction. Grant laughed nervously. My company developed Meridian Shield independently. The giant ballroom screen changed behind him. The marketing presentation disappeared. A technical comparison appeared. Grant's Meridian Shield diagram beside an earlier Sentinel routing architecture. Whole sections matched exactly, including 3 deliberate notation traps used to identify unauthorized copying. Your engineers imported diagrams from Colonel Ward's secure study, a Defense Department attorney said. Internal messages show you ordered the source removed from development records. The drawings were in my house. The trust-owned residence contained a secured compartment marked Federal and Trust Propriety. The attorney replied. Location did not transfer ownership. Natalie whispered, Grant told me the cabinet was old storage. He turned on her. Do not start. You made me move it. You wanted Elena's things gone. You said we were clearing space. You were sleeping in her room. The audience heard them because Grant's microphone remained clipped to his jacket. The sound carried through the ballroom speakers. He tore the device away and threw it onto the floor. Turn off every camera. No one obeyed. The evidence receiver approached with Miriam Shaw, chair of the Valor Meridian Trust. Grant had met her twice and believed she was a cautious institutional investor he could charm. Tonight, she carried the controlling finance documents for his company. Mr. Hale, Miriam said. Valor Meridian's independent board voted to suspend your executive authority pending investigation. Hale Meridian Systems has protective receivership under the senior debt agreement. Elena controls that board. Colonel Ward created the trust, but does not possess unilateral enforcement authority. She recused herself from tonight's vote due to the marital conflict. You cannot remove me from my own company. The company defaulted on disclosure covenants, diverted restricted funds, falsified collateral documents, and concealed a federal technology dispute from investors. The receiver will protect employee payroll, active client obligations, and lawful operations. Your executive spending authority is terminated immediately. And the mansion? Miriam opened another file. Athena Valor Residential Trust holds title. The transfer into Hale Coastal Holdings relied on a forged spousal release and invalid notary credential. A judge has issued a preservation order and appointed temporary management until the title hearing. Natalie looked at me. Are you evicting us tonight? No, I said. Personal belongings, medicine, legal documents, and independently acquired property remain protected. Temporary accommodation has been arranged. The receiver will inventory trust and company assets. Grant pointed toward the convoy. You brought armored vehicles to tell us to pack bags. The vehicles transport security teams and evidence personnel because restricted systems may be inside the property. You want everyone to see me lose. Part of me wanted you to understand what you had dismissed, I admitted. That is why I did not decide the warrants, receivership, or procurement suspension. Evidence and independent authorities did. Vance glanced at me with the faint approval he reserved for uncomfortable honesty. Grant looked toward the investors. This is a revenge performance. She vanished for 6 months and returned with a private army because I moved on. You forged documents during a lawful deployment, the lead federal agent said. Your personal relationship does not explain the financial records. She abandoned the marriage. Divorce law does not authorize signature forgery. She hid money. Miriam answered. The trust financing was disclosed in agreements signed by your attorneys. You chose not to read the beneficial control schedules. The documents were deliberately complicated. Your law firm billed 62 hours reviewing them. Several guests turned away to hide their reactions. Grant's confidence began breaking around the edges. He had always believed complexity existed to be manipulated by the loudest person in the room. Now every document he ignored had become a wall. Natalie moved toward me. Elena, I did not understand what he was doing. You signed as witness. Because he said you approved, you watched him practice my signature. I thought it was for the anniversary invitations. On a deed? I did not read it. You did not want to read it. Tears ran down her face. I loved him. You loved being chosen over me. She stared at the wet stone. Maybe I did. Why? Because you were always the one everyone trusted. Mom trusted you with the bills, the doctors, the funeral. Employers trusted you. Even when you claimed you were just doing paperwork, you carried yourself like every room would eventually listen. I felt like the mistake standing beside you. So you took my husband. He said you made him feel small too, Grant interrupted. Do not blame me for what she already felt. Natalie turned on him. You told me Elena had secret accounts because she planned to leave us both. She did have secret accounts. They funded your company and she kept control. Because you were stealing. You enjoyed the house. I thought it was yours. You never asked because you liked the answer. Their relationship collapsed in front of the same people who had arrived to applaud it. I felt no triumph. Betrayal rarely becomes satisfying when the peoples responsible begin tearing each other apart. It only confirms that loyalty based on shared deception has no structure once truth enters. The federal team found the original forged deed file within 20 minutes. Grant had saved it inside a folder labeled Elena Settlement. The metadata showed 3 versions of my signature, including one copied from my military beneficiary form. They found the secure routing diagrams on Hale Meridian's development server, investor messages falsely claiming General Vance's support, and financial transfers from my deployment account into Natalie's design company. Some transfers had been authorized years earlier. Others were fabricated using an old power of attorney form limited to tax payments. Grant's attorney had expanded the language and reused my digital credential after it expired. You can explain this, Grant told Natalie as agents secured the files. Tell them Elena always gave us permission. She did not give us permission for this. She gave you money for years. That is not the same. It proves a pattern. I looked at him. A pattern of generosity is not permanent consent. His expression sharpened. You think you are morally superior because soldiers salute you. No, you lied about your entire life. I followed a security directive. For 12 years, the cover protected operations and family members. It protected you from accountability. Every time I asked why you were gone, you said paperwork. Every time I wanted to meet your colleagues, you said regulations. You let me believe I mattered more professionally because you enjoyed watching me fail the test. The accusation hurt because part of it was true. I did not enjoy it, I said, but I did test you without telling you. I wanted to know whether you respected me without rank. That was unfair. Grant looked briefly surprised. Then stops this. My unfair secrecy does not erase your forgery. You drove me to it. No, my secrecy hurt the marriage. You could have left, demanded counseling, filed for divorce, or refused my money. You chose my sister, my signature, and my assets. He had no answer that did not reduce him further. General Vance spoke quietly beside me. Your shoulder is bleeding. The old field coat had darkened near the healing incision. A medic approached. I wanted to refuse because the room was still full of evidence. But command meant accepting medical judgment when I expected it from others. The medic guided me to a chair near the entrance and reopened the field dressing. Natalie watched with horror. What happened? Fragment injury during the operation. You said you were at a training conference. I was not allowed to say otherwise. Were you almost killed? Several people were killed. She sat on the step below me. Every day, even after learning about Grant? Especially then. Why didn't you call? Operational blackout. Later, investigators asked me not to alert you before evidence was observed. You came home anyway. I wanted one moment as your sister before becoming part of a case file. She began crying, and I threw you out. Can you forgive me? Not tonight. Do you still love me? Yes. Then why does that not help? Because love is not evidence that trust survived. Grant heard us and laughed bitterly. She will forgive you. Elena always rescues you. I looked at Natalie. She understood before I spoke. Not this time, I said. Miriam explained the temporary property transition. Grant and Natalie would receive supervised access to collect clothing, identification, medication, and personal electronics not covered by warrants. A furnished apartment was available for 30 days. Their lawful personal accounts remained accessible, but disputed transfers were frozen. Company vehicles, artwork purchased through executive funds, and leased jewelry stayed for inventory. Natalie removed my mother's earrings and placed them in my palm. These are yours. They were left equally to both of us. I do not want them tonight. The estate gets still till applies. Keep your share. She shook her head. They feel stolen. Feelings do not change ownership. Take them to an independent appraiser and attorney. Do not make another financial decision, because you are afraid of me. She stared at me, then closed her fingers around the earrings. That was the first boundary I set after reveal. I would not let guilt turn me into the unquestioned commander of her life. Grant's lawyers arrived before 1 a.m. He was not arrested immediately because agents were still reviewing the warrant evidence and prosecutors wanted the full financial chain. He gave a voluntary statement after counsel advised cooperation. Natalie requested separate representation. At 2:12, investigators found messages between them discussing how to declare me financially incompetent if I challenged the deed. Grant had contacted a physician willing to write an opinion based on Natalie's description of my paranoid secrecy, occupational delusions, and emotional detachment. The doctor had never examined me. A draft petition described me as a low-level clerk who exaggerated military importance to explain absences. You plan to institutionalize me? I asked. Natalie looked sick. Grant said it was only leverage. Leverage for what? To make you accept the divorce and property settlement. You listed my classified statements as delusions. I thought they were vague excuses. You knew I served, not like this. Would my suffering matter less if I were only a clerk? She could not answer. That silence revealed more than the forged deed. The room had changed because a general saluted me. The behavior that caused the salute to become necessary had been wrong before anyone knew my title. At 3, the remaining guests were allowed to leave after providing contact information. Some avoided my eyes. Others attempted to approach and thank me for service. I asked the agents to keep the path clear. I did not need strangers converting discomfort into gratitude. A deputy defense contractor who had laughed when Grant called me a clerk quietly removed his Hale Meridian investor badge before exiting. A retired officer stopped near the gate and said, "Colonel, I should have spoken when he threw your pack." "Yes," I replied. He looked surprised that I did not comfort him. "I am sorry." Use the discomfort next time someone without visible authority is mistreated. He saluted. I did not return it because he was in civilian clothes and the gesture felt like apology theater. I shook his hand instead. At dawn, the rain stopped. The sea beyond the mansion turned pale silver. Evidence teams carried sealed servers into vehicles. The ballroom stood half empty, champagne glasses abandoned beneath banners celebrating Grant's leadership. I sat on the hood of an old military jeep used by the command liaison team. My field coat had been replaced with a dry black jacket. The Sentinel insignia rested in my pocket, still scratched from the stone. Vance stood beside the jeep, drinking terrible coffee from a paper cup. "You disobeyed advice," he said. "I returned to the house. You were supposed to remain at the secure residence until warrants were executed. I wanted to see them." "Did it help?" "No." "Will you stop testing family members through concealed power?" "Probably." "That is not an operational answer." "Yes." "Better." He looked toward the mansion. "Do you want the property retained?" "The trust should follow the court order. That is the commander's answer. The wife does not want it, and the sister does not know what she wants. You can remove Grant from the procurement process without destroying every employee. The receiver will preserve legitimate operations. Good. I want the engineers offered independent review and whistleblower protection. Already requested. The company name? That is for restructuring. Remove mine from any architecture license. You never put it there. Grant did in internal filings. Vance nodded. Handled. He studied me. Do you regret the salute? It made them believe I mattered. You did matter, before you arrived. Yes. Then the room learned the wrong lesson first. Rooms often require spectacle before they are willing to study principle. That does not make spectacle safe. No, he finished the coffee, but I did not salute you to teach Grant. I saluted the commander who returned 8 hostages and lost 8 members of her team. My throat tightened. Priya should have come home. Yes. Cole too. Yes, the gala feels obscene beside that. Most personal dramas feel obscene beside operational loss. They still hurt. I wanted their betrayal to become small. It will not. Pain does not surrender because a worse pain exists. You sound like a therapist. 4 stars require extensive pretending. I laughed for the first time that night. Grant emerged from the mansion with 2 attorneys. He carried 1 suitcase and wore the tuxedo beneath an overcoat. Natalie followed separately with a small bag. Federal agents approached Grant at the bottom of the steps and formally arrested him on preliminary charges of wire fraud, forgery of federally connected financial documents, theft of protected technology, and obstruction. The prosecutors had authenticated enough evidence during the search. He did not resist. He looked at me while the agents secured the handcuffs. You could stop this. No, you command these people. I do not command federal prosecutors or the court. You could make a call. That is what you thought power was. You are enjoying this. Part of me wanted consequence. I am not enjoying seeing the man I married arrested. Then help me. Tell the truth, protect your employees, identify every person you pressured, return what can be returned. And us? There is no us. His face hardened. You will die alone inside your secrets. Perhaps. But I will not live beside someone who forged my existence. Agents led him away. Natalie stood near the steps trembling. No one arrested her that morning. She surrendered her passport, agreed to an interview, and entered the temporary apartment under legal supervision. Before leaving, she approached the jeep. Can I call you? Through your attorney for now. You think I am dangerous. I think both of us will confuse emotion with clarity. Do you want me prosecuted? I want accurate evidence and proportional accountability. That sounds cold. It is warmer than deciding your guilt myself. I am your sister. That makes independent process more necessary, not less. She looked at the convoy. I used to think you were weak because you never demanded credit. Silence was not always strength. Why didn't you tell me about Sentinel? Security first, later fear. Fear of what? That you would respect the commander more than the sister. Tears filled her eyes. You were right. That does not make hiding right. Can we ever come back from this? Not to what we were. Something else? Maybe. After truth, consequence. And time. She nodded and entered the receiver's car. The convoy left the mansion shortly after sunrise. I sat in the rear of the jeep rather than the command vehicle. As we passed the coastal gate, I looked back once. The mansion's windows reflected the morning, hiding the empty ballroom. I had purchased the house because Grant once told me he dreamed of waking beside the ocean. Natalie selected the furniture. I authorize each transfer while sitting in temporary command posts, aircraft hangars, and secure rooms. I had believed providing beauty could compensate for absence. Instead, the house became a stage where they performed ownership until they forgot who paid the cost. The criminal and civil cases lasted more than 3 years. Grant initially claimed every disputed transfer was a marital gift. That defense collapsed when investigators found separate messages describing the plan to take control before my return. His attorney argued the classified nature of my work caused legitimate confusion about income and property. The jury agreed that secrecy complicated the marriage but did not authorize forged signatures, false notary records, stolen technology, or investor fraud. Grant pleaded guilty before the second phase of trial to conspiracy, wire fraud, technology theft, and falsifying procurement materials. He received 8 years in federal prison, restitution obligations, and a permanent prohibition from serving as an executive in federally contracted defense companies. Online retellings later claimed I blacklisted him from every industry. I did not. Courts and regulators imposed restrictions connected to his crimes. After release, private employers would decide whether to trust him. Hale Meridian Systems survived under new leadership. More than 400 employees had not participated in Grant's fraud. The receiver separated the safe vehicle monitoring platform from the copied Sentinel architecture, canceled misleading investor commitments, and created an employee ownership plan. Engineers who reported test problems received protection. The company was renamed Coastal Meridian Technologies and eventually built emergency transport systems for hospitals and disaster zones. Justice that destroys innocent workers to satisfy a betrayed spouse is only revenge with official stationery. Natalie's case remained more complicated. She admitted witnessing the forged signature and signing the deed as a witness, but prosecutors found that Grant controlled the technical filings, financial accounts, and investor representations. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit property fraud and making false statements during the original title registration. The court considered her cooperation, lack of prior record, and role in recovering transferred assets. She served 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by supervised release and restitution. My mother called me cruel when the plea became public. She had always protected Natalie from consequence and saw prison as proof that I had chosen rank over blood. You could have told prosecutors she was manipulated, she said. I told them what I knew. You could have asked for mercy. Her attorney did. You are her sister. I was also the victim and a potential conflict. I did not request a sentence. Silence is a choice, so is lying. We did not speak for 6 months, eventually. My mother entered family counseling with Natalie and me. She admitted that she had trained both daughters into roles. Elena handles everything. Natalie needs protection. I thought praising your strength was love, she told me. It became permission to give you more weight, Natalie cried. And every time I failed, you gave me a reason it was not my fault. I wanted you to believe in yourself. You taught me to believe consequences belonged to someone else. That conversation did not repair us, but it ended the story in which betrayal appeared from nowhere. Grant exploited fractures that had existed long before him. He was responsible for his choices. We were responsible for the family habits that made his lies comfortable. The mansion entered a lengthy title review. Athena Valor Trust recovered ownership after the court voided the forged transfer. I refused to live there. Too much of the architecture held memories of decisions made through absence. The trust sold the property at market value after the investigation ended. Proceeds repaid legal costs, restored diverted military bonuses, covered employee obligations, and funded a residential transition program for women leaving military service after long classified assignments. The program offered housing, financial counseling, family reintegration, and legal protection against identity or property fraud. We named it Harbor House, not Honor Protocol. Honor sounded dramatic. Housing required plumbing, childcare, forms, security deposits, and staff who answered phones at 3 a.m. Restoration was rarely cinematic. I returned to active command for 4 more years. Operation Night Harbor remained classified until the hostages and participating countries were safe. When partial records were released, the public learned that Sentinel-9 existed and that I had commanded the rescue. Reporters wanted photographs of the night General Vance saluted me outside the mansion. I refused most interviews. The story was too easy to flatten into a fantasy. Weak wife exposed as powerful commander, cheating husband destroyed by military convoy, jealous sister dragged away at dawn. Reality moved differently. I was never weak, but I was secretive. Grant was not destroyed because he cheated. He was convicted because he committed fraud and endangered defense systems. Natalie was not punished for falling in love with the wrong man. She was sentenced because she participated in forgery. The convoy did not come to defend my pride. It arrived because restricted technology, federal evidence, and a commanding officer's identity had been compromised. Yet the emotional truth beneath the exaggerated version remained. The 2 people closest to me believed I deserved less respect when they thought my work was ordinary. Rank forced them to see what character should have revealed. During Natalie's incarceration, she wrote me every month. Her first letters mixed apology with blame. She described how lonely she felt after Grant turned to me for financial decisions but came to her for admiration. She said I had made secrecy feel like rejection. She accused me of buying loyalty instead of asking for love. Some accusations were true. None erased her choices, I answered carefully. I should have told you more about my life within security limits. I should not have solved every crisis with money. I should have allowed you to experience manageable failure. I did not cause you to forge my signature. Her fourth letter contained one sentence that changed our correspondence. I kept waiting for you to rescue me from the consequences, and every week you did not. I understood a little more about what I had asked you to survive. After release, Natalie moved into supervised housing and found work at a community architecture firm. She could no longer use funds connected to the design studio built with disputed transfers. She sold most of her luxury possessions to satisfy restitution. My mother wanted me to buy her an apartment. I refused but paid for independent financial counseling available equally through Harbor House's family program. You own buildings, my mother said, and she earns a salary. She is starting over. Then starting smaller is not abandonment. Natalie supported my decision. Do not fight Elena for me, she told our mother. That is how we started. We met 1 year after her release at a neutral counseling center. She looked older and quieter. Do you hate me? She asked. No. Do you trust me? Not with money, legal authority, my home, or personal secrets. She gave a painful smile, very specific. Clarity is kinder than pretending. Do you want a relationship? Yes. What does that mean? Monthly meetings at first, no financial rescue, no contact with military work, no discussing Grant unless therapy requires it. If either of us lies, we pause. Can I hug you? I hesitated, then nodded. The hug felt familiar and foreign. She cried against my shoulder, careful of the scar she had finally learned about. Trust did not return with the hug. It returned in fractures across years. She arrived when promised. She corrected our mother when excuses appeared. She repaid restitution beyond the required amount. She told a future employer about the conviction before the background check. She stopped using shame as evidence that she deserved immediate comfort. I stopped using independence as proof that I needed nothing. I told her when deployment anniversaries hurt, I allowed her to bring food after surgery. We learned that boundaries can hold love without turning it into access. Grant wrote from prison during his 2nd year. His first letter blamed my secrecy for everything. His second accused General Vance of using him to make an example for defense contractors. His third described how other prisoners mocked him after recognizing the case. I did not answer. The fourth letter was different. I knew you were more than a clerk, he wrote. I did not know the rank or command, but I knew no ordinary employee received calls at midnight that made generals wait. I told myself your silence meant you had nothing impressive to say because your actual importance threatened the way I understood our marriage. Every dollar from the trust felt like proof that my ideas deserved support. I never asked why the support arrived when lenders refused. I wanted to be self-made so badly that I treated the person building the ground beneath me as an obstacle. He admitted beginning the affair not because he loved Natalie more, but because she reflected the version of him he wanted to believe. She praised decisions you questioned. She needed my confidence. You needed evidence. I chose the room where I was always right. He asked whether I would support early release. I declined. Complete the sentence, I wrote. Cooperate with restitution. Protect the former employees from additional litigation. Change without using access to me as proof. He later completed financial ethics programs and helped investigators identify 2 attorneys who facilitated fraudulent military spouse transfers in unrelated cases. I acknowledged the cooperation through his counsel. We never restored personal contact. After his release, he accepted an operations job at a commercial warehouse company. He was prohibited from federal defense work, but not from rebuilding a lawful life. A journalist asked whether I was disappointed he was not left homeless. No, I said. Accountability is not permanent social death. The answer received less attention than photographs of the convoy. General Vance retired 2 years after I did. At his ceremony, he introduced me publicly without mentioning the mansion. Colonel Ward taught this command that invisible systems decide whether visible courage survives, he said. She also taught senior officers that refusing support is not the same as strength. Afterward, I accused him of using my therapy notes in a speech. You would not share therapy notes, he said. Then how did you know? You have been refusing help since 2009. Observation is not authorization. File a complaint. We became friends without the formal distance command had required. He visited Harbor House and spent an afternoon listening to women describe the difficulty of returning from deployments to families who treated classified silence as emotional abandonment. One captain said, "My husband did not steal my property." But he built an entire explanation for my absence because I could not give him the real one. Vance looked at me. Secrecy has operational costs that never appear in mission budgets, he said. That sentence shaped the next reform. We created family liaison protocols allowing special operations personnel to share verified support information without revealing missions. Families received independent financial oversight during long blackouts. Property transfers required live identity confirmation if a service member was deployed under restricted communication. Power of attorney documents expired automatically after each assignment unless renewed. Military spouses gained confidential access to counselors who understood secrecy without romanticizing it. Those reforms mattered more than the dramatic honor protocol activation. A watch can alert a command. A good system prevents the crisis that requires the alert. Years later, I returned to the road outside the former mansion. The new owners had converted the property into a coastal rehabilitation hotel. The iron gates remained. But the security booth was gone. I stood near the stone wall where I had waited in the rain. My Sentinel insignia rested in a display case at the Joint Operations Museum, scratched side facing outward by my request. The plaque did not mention Grant or Natalie. It read, "Authority does not begin when others recognize it. Character does not end when they refuse." A young woman from Harbor House visited the museum with me once. She had served as an intelligence analyst and returned from deployment to discover her fiancé had emptied their savings. "Do you think he would have treated you differently if he knew you were the commander?" she asked. "Yes." Does that make the secret partly responsible? It explains the conditions. It does not authorize the betrayal. I keep thinking I should have seen what my fiancé was doing. Perhaps he should not have done it. Both can be true? Unfortunately, she smiled. Everyone at Harbor House says that is your favorite sentence. Reality refuses convenient innocence. Do you ever wish you had arrived in uniform instead of the old coat? I thought about Grant's face when Vance saluted, Natalie's fear, and the sudden transformation of the room. No, the coat showed me what the uniform would have hidden. Was knowing worth it? Not always. Then why are you glad? I am not glad. I am no longer confused. My mother died peacefully several years later. Natalie and I sat beside her together. In her final lucid hours, she apologized for teaching me that capable children require less protection. "I thought you were born strong," she said. I did not understand strength can be an adaptation. She apologized to Natalie for turning rescue into identity. "I made you believe love arrived after failure and removed consequence." Natalie held her hand. "We all helped build it. Your sister carried more. I know. After the funeral, Natalie and I divided our mother's estate through independent attorneys. The estate was small: an apartment, modest savings, jewelry, photographs, and a collection of letters. We did not fight. The diamond earrings went to Natalie because our mothers will specified them. She wore them once, then placed them in a bank box. They remind me of the gala, she said. They also belong to Mom. I am trying to let objects carry more than one memory. That sounds healthy. Do not sound surprised. We laughed. Our relationship never returned to childhood closeness. It became more deliberate and perhaps more real. Natalie later married a teacher named Marcus Chen. Before their wedding, she disclosed every debt, conviction, and family boundary. She refused money from me but accepted the use of Harbor House's community hall at the rate charged to staff. I attended in a simple navy dress. No uniform, medals, convoy, or general appeared. During the reception, Marcus thanked the kitchen staff before the donors. Natalie looked at me across the room and smiled. That small gesture mattered because it was not performed for power. When I retired from military service, I donated most of my Valor Meridian voting interest into an employee, veteran, and public benefit trust. No spouse, sibling, commander, or future child could inherit unilateral control. Some advisors said I was giving away a family legacy. I had seen what happened when family love and financial control shared the same locked room. The trust provided grants through transparent rules. Natalie could apply but received no preference. I retained enough income for a comfortable home near the coast, though not the mansion. My house had 3 bedrooms, a workshop, and a porch facing rough water. I kept the old canvas backpack near the front door. One winter evening, General Vance visited and noticed it. "You replaced the torn strap," he said. Natalie repaired it. Symbolic, practical. You dislike symbols when they are obvious. Symbols become dangerous when people mistake them for substance. Like 4 stars, especially 4 stars. He touched the flame spot on his retired jacket where medals once rested. "Do you regret ordering the salute?" I asked. "I did not order anyone else. I saluted my commander. You outranked me." Ceremony allowed flexibility. You enjoyed the effect. I enjoyed Grant discovering the Department of Defense existed beyond his investor deck. That is not a regulation. Retirement has released me from footnotes. He became serious. Did the salute help you for a moment, and later? It complicated the lesson. People believed the betrayal mattered because I was important. You were important. Every betrayed clerk is important. True. Every person thrown from a home, mocked for ordinary work, or erased by a confident spouse deserves law without requiring a convoy. Also true. The story people repeat is about power returning. What is the story you remember? I looked through the window at the sea. The moment Natalie admitted she feared losing access to my money, that was the first honest sentence. Not the affair. The affair was visible. Entitlement was the foundation. And your foundation? Secrecy, rescue, and wanting to be loved without being fully known. Vance nodded. You built Harbor House because you could not rebuild the marriage. Partly. That is not failure. No, you sound disappointed. Some victories are structures built around an unhealed place. Structures can still shelter people. He died from heart failure 3 years later. At his military funeral, I stood in the front row with his family. When the honor guard folded the flag, I remembered him stepping from the command vehicle while rain covered the road. I remembered the salute, but I also remembered the years before it, field arguments, mission reviews, hospital visits, and the moment he told me not to confront Grant alone. After the funeral, his daughter handed me a letter. Vance had written, "Elena, stop pretending you regret every dramatic decision. You needed the room to know because part of you had spent 12 years believing invisibility was the price of honest love. The room's silence did not create your worth, but it gave you permission to stop hiding it from yourself. Use power carefully. Do not apologize for having survived long enough to possess it." I kept the letter beside my mother's final note. Retirement gave me time to teach at the Joint Leadership College. My course was officially called Operational Integrity Under Compartmented Conditions. Students called it Secrets, Systems, and Family Disasters. I began with logistics, not marriage. We studied how information asymmetry affects decision-making, how hidden authority can distort relationships, and how leaders protect classified work without treating loved ones as security risks. In the final session, I showed the forged deed, the copied architecture diagrams, and the honor protocol activation record. I did not show footage of Grant or Natalie. What failed first, I asked. Students usually answered trust, marriage, document security, or financial oversight. The best answer came from a young major who said, "Consent boundaries failed because everyone believed past support guaranteed future access." "Correct," I said. "And what restored the system?" "The convoy," another student offered. "No." "The warrants?" "Partly." "Independent authority?" "Yes." No injured party should possess unchecked power over the person who harmed them. My recusal protected the legitimacy of the outcome, and emotionally the major asked, "Time, boundaries?" "Responsibility, and relationships that survived without money. Did you forgive them?" "Forgiveness is not a security clearance. It does not automatically restore access. Your sister." I forgave parts of the harm after she accepted consequence. Trust remained limited and grew through evidence. "Your husband?" I released the need to see him suffer. We did not restore contact. Would you have done anything differently? I would have disclosed more about the nature of my service within legal limits. I would have separated support from secrecy. I would not have financed a company without transparent governance. I would not test love by pretending to possess less power. Would that have stopped the affair? I do not know. The forgery? Perhaps. Better systems reduce opportunity. They do not manufacture character. I ended each course with the same sentence. Honor is not the moment a general salutes. Honor is what remains when no one expects consequence. That principle followed me into old age. At Harbor House, I met women who had commanded aircraft, intelligence cells, medical teams, and logistics networks, yet returned home to relatives who treated them as absent wallets. I also met spouses who had endured years of uncertainty and learned to make decisions without information. Not every broken relationship contained a villain. Some contained two exhausted people protecting different realities. We taught them to distinguish pain from permission. Loneliness may explain an affair. It does not authorize theft. Secrecy may wound intimacy. It does not authorize forgery. Financial support may create dependence. It does not create ownership of the supporter. Rank may accelerate justice. It does not make the unranked less deserving. On the 15th anniversary of the gala, Natalie visited my coastal house carrying the old Sentinel backpack. I found this in storage after moving, she said. I thought you kept it. I have another field bag. This is the one Grant threw outside. The green repairs remained, and one metal buckle was bent. She had cleaned the mud but left the stains. Do you want it? She asked. Why did you keep it? At first, guilt. Later, because it reminded me that I watched him throw your life into the rain and worried more about the guests. A backpack is not my life, I know, but it carried the part I refused to see. I took it from her. Thank you. Can I ask something? Yes. When you pressed the watch, did you know the convoy would come? I knew command would receive the alert. Investigators already had warrants in progress. I did not know the timing. Were you afraid? Yes. Of Grant? Of what I would become if I used authority while angry. Did you want soldiers to drag us out? For approximately 30 seconds. She smiled sadly, honest. Then I remembered Priya sealing the blast door. Power purchased by people's deaths cannot become a weapon for domestic humiliation. I am sorry I made you carry both. You did not cause the operation. No, I added betrayal when you came home from it. Yes, she looked toward the sea. Do you think Grant ever loved you? Yes. Then how could he do it? Love without humility can become entitlement. People protect the version of love that makes them feel powerful and destroy the person who contradicts it. Did I love you? Yes. Same answer, different form. I thought loving you meant trusting that you would eventually understand and rescue me. And now? Now I think love means accepting that your boundaries are not punishment. We sat on the porch until the evening turned cold. Before leaving, she placed the backpack beside my door. I later donated it to Harbor House's training center. The display contained no medals. It included the backpack, a copy of the voided deed, an expired power of attorney form, a blank emergency housing application, and a simple plaque. She was important before the convoy arrived. Visitors often photographed the words. Few photographed the forms, though the forms saved more lives. The title people continued to repeat was dramatic. Husband and sister mocked me as a failed clerk and threw me into the rain. Then they fainted when a military convoy arrived to salute their special ops commander. Grant did not faint. Natalie nearly did. The convoy did not exist solely for me. The military did not seize a private mansion by personal command. Courts issued orders, federal agents preserved evidence, and independent trustees controlled assets. Those distinctions mattered because truth should remain stable after excitement fades, yet I understood why people preferred the title. It offered a world where humiliation receives immediate correction, hidden sacrifice becomes visible. And those who judge ordinary clothes are forced to face extraordinary authority. Real life rarely provides such clean reversals. My reversal arrived in armored vehicles, but healing came through quieter things. A sister serving her sentence without demanding rescue, a mother admitting favoritism, employees keeping their jobs, a company removing stolen technology, a former husband completing accountability without regaining access. A general reminding me that survival did not require apology, and a house where returning service members could sleep without wondering who had changed the locks. I once believed the most powerful moment of my life was standing in the rain while 4 stars rose in salute. It was not. The most powerful moment came years later when Natalie asked for help with a modest legal form and I said, I will show you where to find an independent advisor, but I will not complete it for you. She nodded and did not call me cruel. That was change. Another came when a young soldier at Harbor House introduced herself as an administrative clerk, and someone asked whether she was only support staff. Before I could speak, Natalie said, "There is no only in the work that keeps everyone else standing." That was understanding. In my final years, my hands began to shake from an old nerve injury. I could no longer fasten the tiny clasp on the Sentinel insignia. A nurse offered to help me wear it at a memorial event. I declined. "People will expect it," she said. "Then expectation can survive disappointment." I attended in a dark coat with no visible rank. A hotel employee guided me toward a rear table because the front seats were reserved for decorated speakers. For one dangerous second, the old memory returned. Rain Gates Grant's hand on Natalie's waist. Then the event organizer rushed over, recognized me, and began apologizing. "No need," I said. "Is the rear table available?" "Colonel Ward, you are the keynote guest. I can speak from the rear." The hotel employee looked terrified. I touched her arm gently. "You did nothing wrong. You followed the seating list." The organizer moved my name to the correct place. I sat at the front because refusing would create another performance. During the speech, I told the audience what I had learned. Do not romanticize hidden greatness. Most people treated as insignificant are not secret commanders, billionaires, judges, or owners. They should not need to be. The moral test is not whether the person you mock can return with power. The test is who you become when you believe they cannot. The room stood afterward. I wished they had remained seated and changed one decision later. Perhaps some did. When I returned home, the sea was rough and the porch lights were on. Natalie had left soup in the refrigerator with a note. "No rescue required, just dinner." I smiled. On the wall above my desk hung no photograph of the convoy. I kept a picture of Sentinel 9 before Operation Night Harbor. 8 people laughing beside an aircraft because none knew which image would become the last. Priya stood in the center. Cole held a coffee. I stood at the edge wearing the old field coat. They had known exactly who I was without stars, titles, or public records. Grant and Natalie had not. For years I thought that difference defined my worth. Eventually I understood it defined their perception, not me. I was the commander underground, the clerk on paper, the abandoned wife at the gate, the sister whose money seemed endless, and the woman sitting alone after the convoy left. None of those identities canceled the others. Honor was not the expensive mansion, the company, the uniform, or even the truth finally displayed on a giant screen. Honor was the decision to preserve employees while prosecuting leaders, to recuse myself when anger created conflict, to let Natalie face consequence without denying love, to admit my secrecy caused harm without accepting responsibility for fraud, and to build systems strong enough that the next woman would not need a 4-star general to prove she owned her own life. Grant once told me I belonged in a relief shelter because I was a failed clerk with an old backpack. He believed value could be measured by who controlled the gates. At dawn, the gates opened for the convoy, his company entered receivership. And the deed he forged became evidence, but that was not the moment I won. I won when I stopped confusing silence with strength. I won when I allowed truth to stand without becoming cruelty. I won when the mansion disappeared from my life and left no empty space I needed to fill. Years after the title, the arrests, and the uniforms faded from public memory, I remained what I had always been. A woman who carried other people through dangerous places, sometimes across borders, sometimes through systems, sometimes through the consequences of their own choices. The difference was that I finally learned not to carry everyone at the cost of abandoning myself.